Follow Famous and Gravy on the Wondery app or wherever you get your podcasts. You can listen to Famous and Gravy early and ad-free now by joining Wondery Plus in the Wondery app, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify.
At Hotels.com, we know some travelers crave an ocean breeze. Others don't want to deal with sand. And oftentimes, those two people end up together. Compare properties side by side to find yourself poolside, oceanside, and still in a relationship. Find your perfect somewhere with Hotels.com.
Hey, Famous and Gravy listeners, Michael Osborne here. Before we begin today's episode, I want to bring you in on a little behind the scenes at Famous and Gravy. We are having a go for broke moment with the show. It's now or never to give our show a lift. And if it is going to succeed, I need your help. I need voices for the opening quiz. I need feedback on what's working and what's not. But most importantly, more than anything, I need your help spreading the word. If there is an episode from our archives that spoke to you, please share it with a friend. If you've got your phone in your hand right now, just send it to somebody who could maybe use a hopeful message, especially in these troubling times. Above all else, our show is about connection. The whole structure and design of Famous and Gravy is meant to create a fun conversation with a close friend that allows us to drift into places where we find insight, meaning, and purpose, because we all need that. And for those of you who have found that on this show, I can barely begin to express my gratitude. Thank you for your support. That's it. Let's get to it.
This is Famous and Gravy, biographies from a different point of view. To participate in our opening quiz, email us at hello@famousandgravy.com. Now, here's the quiz to reveal today's dead celebrity.
This person died 2014, age 86. In high school, he played football and basketball. And in 1950, when the Korean War broke out, he was drafted.
Basketball? I know more people who played football during World War II.
I was going to say Paul Newman.
Not Paul Newman, who we recently did on the show. He was a genuine star, but as an actor, something of a paradox. A lantern-jawed, brawny athlete whose physical appeal was both enhanced and undercut by a disarming wit.
Jimmy Stewart?
Arnold Schwarzenegger? No, he's alive.
Arnold Schwarzenegger is still with us. He came to acting late and by accident. On his own, after the age of 14, and a bit of a drifter, he had been working an endless series of jobs. Telephone installer, oil field roughneck, and, fatefully, gas station attendant.
Fatefully, gas station attendant. Oh, so he must have met someone.
I have no idea.
Anthony Quinn.
Not Anthony Quinn. An understated comic actor, he was especially adept at conveying life's tiny bedevilments. Isn't that a great word?
It is a great word. Johnny Carson?
Bedevilments. I feel like I'm being bedeviled here.
This is a bedeviling experience. He was best known as the amiable gambler Bret Maverick in the 1950s Western Maverick. He also played Jim Rockford in The Rockford Files.
Wait, is it James Garner?
James Garner.
Oh, James Garner.
Today's dead celebrity is James Garner.
No, I have no regrets. I mean, my goodness, Charlie. Here's this dumb farm kid from Oklahoma, born and raised during the Depression. We didn't have anything, but nobody had anything, so I didn't want anybody to feel sorry for me. And, come to Hollywood, get a career, become famous, make some money, have a wonderful family. What would I change? Nothing. I wouldn't change a thing.
Welcome to Famous and Gravy. I'm Michael Osborne.
And I'm Michael Warburton.
And on this show, we choose a famous figure who died in the 21st century and we take a totally different approach to their biography. What didn't we know? What could we not see clearly? And what does a celebrity's life story teach us about ourselves? Today, James Garner. Died 2014, age 86. All right, so I have dragged my friend Michael Warburton back onto Famous and Gravy. Michael is an actor in the UK. A few weeks ago, you and I were talking about doing another episode, and you sent me over a list of names, and we landed on James Garner. What is behind that? What was in your mind when you were like, man, let's do a James Garner episode?
Well, one of the things that it's a bit of a privilege, but also fascinating for me being on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. I post a lot of stuff primarily about movies and movie people. And I get a huge response. I mean, hundreds and thousands of replies. And so I get a real sense of what degree of love there is out there for a certain person or a certain film or a certain director, actor, whatever. Consistently over the years, the degree of love for James Garner has been absolutely top shelf, grade A. And it's not just from the demographic that you would think. It seems to be right across the age ranges. He's held in such high esteem, Michael.
I'm looking forward to getting into this episode because I have some theories as to why that's the case. And there's also some reasons why it's surprising to me that that's the case. So let's just get right to it. Category 1, grading the first line of their obituary. James Garner, the wry and handsome leading man who slid seamlessly between television and the movies, but was best known as the amiable gambler Bret Maverick in the 1950s Western Maverick, and the cranky sleuth Jim Rockford in the 1970s series The Rockford Files, died on Saturday at his home in Los Angeles. He was 86. There's some great adjectives in here: wry, handsome, amiable, cranky. like it's already painting a pretty good picture. Out of the gate, I thought this is strong. What was your reaction?
Yeah, absolutely the same. You know, the opening line of an obit, they vary so much in terms of what they capture and what they express and tell the reader in terms of inviting them in. And I thought this was an absolute belter. These are great descriptors: wry, handsome, amiable, cranky. People might have been a little bit more surprised by cranky, but I think once you get to know James Garner, that's in the mix. But I loved it, Michael.
Well, I mean, what's funny is that, so wry and handsome seem to refer to the man himself, and amiable refers to Bret Maverick, and cranky to Jim Rockford. But I think James Garner, it'd be the first to say, those characters are very close to my heart. They're not like a big reach for who I am. And I think his skills as an actor, I don't put him in that category of Daniel Day-Lewis or Philip Seymour Hoffman or Gary Oldman or whatever. He's not somebody who you like becomes unrecognizable. But he is a good actor and maybe even a great actor. So I guess what I'm trying to get at here is that these adjectives, 2 of them definitely apply to the man, and the other 2 apply to characters that are very tightly associated with the man, and I think rightly so.
I think you're bang on. Look, he wasn't a generational talent, and he'd have been the first to admit that.
Yeah. He's almost proud of that in a way, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. He never tried to hide that. He's no Brando.
Yeah. He takes it seriously, but it's got a almost like wry smile about what it means to be a Hollywood actor. I mean, like there's a quality of him where he understands the job and he does the job. He doesn't have some sort of relationship to it, like you were saying, Brando or some other like great actors of his generation.
I've never been that confident. You know, I don't have the background in acting. You know, some people do. They went to all these classes.
Well, did you feel a little bit inferior because of that?
For a while, yeah. But I remember Natalie Wood. I was starring in Maverick for about 2 years.
Yeah.
And she said, you know, Jim, what you need to do now is go to acting school. I said, why would I do that?
Yes.
I said, so far I got the hottest show on television. It seems to be going well. And I said, when it goes down the hill and I'm going with it, I'll think about going to acting school.
Now, why does she want you
I'm not going to mess up anything good.
Exactly right. If somebody once said, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Right.
I gotta ask you though, you're an actor. I mean, do you take offense at somebody who has this sort of like, I don't need to go to acting school. I'm already there. Because I think you are an appreciator of the art and the craft. So is it somehow like dismissive to you?
No, I never take offense at it. Whenever this comes up, I always bring up that interesting area of actors, are they born or made? I think fundamentally they're born, and I think you can then to a good drama school, and I was very lucky and went to one of the best.
Yeah.
You go to drama school and you add things like technique and craft and artistry to it. But I think actors, you can either do it or you can't. And then also what you've got to add, which is a key thing with James Garner as well, is the discipline to be professional, not just the discipline to get into the technique, but and he was a total pro.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think we'll talk more about that there's a sort of difference between responsibility of the job and a sort of like infatuation with training and the art. And those are not necessarily the same thing. Before we move off the obit, I mean, I think that the thing that gave me some pause and I want to talk about with you. All right, so I would suspect that while there are a lot of people who know and love James Garner, there are some people who do not know who he is. And if you're an older boomer, you absolutely know who Bret Maverick is. That was an important TV show in the 1950s and 60s, Maverick. And I think if you're Gen X, you probably know Jim Rockford. The Rockford Files was a huge successful show in the 1970s. What is not in here are any movies. They say slid seamlessly between television and movies, but they don't reference any specific movies. What's surprising is there's not one quintessential James Garner movie. I think if you were to make a case, it would probably be The Great Escape. But in that, he's not top billed. It's Steve McQueen, probably. I mean, it's an ensemble cast. But when you look at his IMDb and say, what is the Jim Garner movie that everybody knows? It's not obvious. He's more of a supporting cast member, and younger audiences might know him from The Notebook, the 2004 movie, or Space Cowboys, the Clint Eastwood movie, but there's not like a blockbuster where he's top billed in the movies. So if you, Michael, were to say, well, we should point to one movie, would it be The Great Escape?
It can only be that, really. There's lots of other great movies that we'll talk about or hopefully mention, but
that one sort of stands apart.
It does. It's not quintessential James Garner because you're absolutely right. There is no quintessential James Garner movie. You know, you have to be in your sort of 70s, like you say, a proper boomer to be aware of Maverick. You've got to be in your 50s at least to be aware of the Rockford Files. So I'm not sure I understand or know how the younger demographic
has any idea who this is.
Yeah,
that's my point. Two things on this. One, when I was going through his IMDb, I was surprised that I could not find that one more recent starring role, because he is for some reason somebody I've always known about and liked, but what is the singular association? It's not really there. And then the second point is back to the obit. Should they have included a nod to The Great Escape? You could kind of make the case for it because it is maybe the, biggest or most durable or most remembered movie that he's in, but he's not top billed, and that probably was the right call to not put that in here. So
I think so.
I wanted to talk out that before we gave our scores. I'll go ahead and give my score. I'm going 10 out of 10 here. I think that this one's awesome. Really cannot find a fault. I love the vocabulary. I love the references they point to. I like this slid seamlessly thing. I think that that's something that's an incredible achievement of his that has to be pointed to, because not everybody slides seamlessly between movies and TV, especially during this era. So no notes, 10 out of 10 for me. What's your score?
I'm really close. I'm 9 out of 10, and I'll tell you why I'm dropping them a point. And this is just a personal thing. I like to highlight when I talk about an actor, whether they won an Oscar, how many Oscars they won, or whether they were Oscar nominated. And it's nice and short. It's like winner of 3 Oscars, Oscar nominated. I think he's worth Oscar nominated James Garner, or Oscar nominated and 3 times Emmy winner James Garner.
He was nominated like 3 times or something. He was up for awards without ever winning, correct?
I think he won 3 Emmys.
Did he? Oh, I'm sorry. He was up for Oscars without ever winning.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. That was for Murphy's Romance, yeah.
Yeah. Very fair note. I'm still going with my 10 out of 10 because it would have made the sentence a little long, but we both sign off on this one.
Fantastic opening. Yeah.
All right. 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10. Okay, category 2, 5 things I love about you. Here, Michael and I will develop a list of 5 things that offer a different angle on who this person was and how they lived. Before we get into it, there's just one thing I want to say here, because I think this is going to come up, and it's an idea I want to introduce. There is something about James Garner and his persona that really reminds me of my dad, of my father. And I have great parents, man. I'm very lucky that way. And my dad, he's from North Texas. James Garner's from Oklahoma. There's a kind of like similarity with them. My dad talks like Hank Hill. He's got that voice. And there is a sort of slow river cadence to the way James Garner speaks that as I was going through the research, I was like, maybe one of the reasons this guy sticks out for me personally is that he's got some similarities with my dad. So I kind of want to explore that a little in this episode. So anyway, why don't you kick us off? What's thing number 1 you have for 5 things I love about you?
Firstly, that's really interesting about your father. Yeah. It's interesting the way we could connect with people that are famous we've never met, and who obviously, bearing in mind Famous and Gravy, have passed on. I don't have that type of familial background, I have to say. Mine's very different.
You didn't grow up with a dad from North Texas? Or a dad who you want to talk about on a Dead Celebrity podcast? Yeah.
Exactly. I really don't. Yeah. But that's why I think I'm going to kick off going down the angle of his background and his upbringing.
As thing number 1, upbringing.
Yeah,
okay.
I think that's important because to contextualize it before I start talking about it, James Garner, known for being wry and amiable and all the stuff that we're going to talk about, actually got to a stage in his life where he got to that classic fork in the road where he could have gone bad boy, he could have been an absolute disaster, dying young, or he chose to go the way that he did, which is kind of incredible because...
A man of integrity and respect and so forth.
Absolutely, which kind of is interesting, to put it mildly, when you bear in mind, born in Oklahoma, his mother dies age 5. His father ships him and his 2 brothers off to family relatives to be fostered. They come back a year later when he's 6 or 7 to find that his father's found a new wife and a new mother for his kids. And
I feel like we should say this is all like Depression era Oklahoma.
Oh, God, yes. This is Grapes of Wrath stuff. This really is.
Yeah,
I mean,
to paint a picture. Yeah.
Yeah. He was born into that era. But anyway, the boys come back from being fostered with family relatives. They come back to the classic evil stepmother, Wilma.
Yeah, I mean, abusive, straight up violent.
Oh, yeah. I mean, she beat the crap out of all 3 of them for 3 years. She especially beat the crap out of James Garner. She would punish him by making him wear a dress in public. I mean, she was really nasty. Cut to, he's been putting up with this for years and years. His father was told by Garner's stepmom that his second wife was just being a disciplinarian. But in fact, age 14, he can't take it anymore. She comes at him violently again one day. He punches her.
Who was this woman, Wilma, in your life?
Oh, well, that was my first stepmother. And she was nasty.
Really?
Yeah, she was a tough lady. She beat me about every day for 7 years.
You're kidding. Did you tell your dad?
He knew it, but she'd say, oh, he did this, he did that. And the thing that really broke up the marriage, she was going to whip me once when I was 14, and I decided, no, she's not. I popped her a good one. And let me tell you, this was a tough woman.
He punches her head falls back onto a bookshelf, she's on the floor, and he's trying to restrain her on the floor. His dad walks in, sees this scene in front of him, and he asks his wife, what is going on? And she says, it's always him, it's always his fault. Now, at that stage, Garner's father knew this was crap and said, right, that's it. She left the next day, never to return. So, this is all pretty tough stuff.
It's sort of, you could say absent parenting, but born out of poverty. I mean, the way he talks about his dad, he's like, good guy, but he was just trying to make ends meet and wasn't involved. So there's not hostility, but it's the circumstances with which a violent step-parent can step into a situation, and that's what happens.
Well, I mean, his dad owned and run a general store, so he didn't have staff. If he wasn't there, the store didn't open. If the store didn't open, they didn't make money. So father was present, father doing his best, but fundamentally as a parent, absent.
So is that where the upbringing story ends for you, as an adolescent, or is there a bit more to this?
Well, just a little bit. I kind of want to take him up to a certain point. So he goes into the National Guard, and he also ends up going into the Merchant Navy and getting a few months in World War II. He actually was discharged pretty quickly because he had violent seasickness, which is kind of funny. But he was discharged, but very shortly after that, he goes into the Korean War. Now, the Korean War was another make-or-break situation that could have turned this guy into a crazy guy.
Yeah, and he's quite the advocate for Korean War vets. There's a whole bunch of stuff in his memoir all about this. But all of this is like pre-Hollywood stuff. This is the stuff that shaped and made, his character.
Yeah, very much. And I think it's worth mentioning that, while he was out in Korea, him and his regiment were on the front line. They were in one battle and one skirmish at one point during the war where 60% of his regiment were killed. He saw some dreadful stuff. He also took some serious injuries to his face, to his rear end, to his knees.
He got a Purple Heart for being wounded. Yeah,
he did. He came away with 2 from the Korean War, but he saw some really terrible stuff out there. But anyway, he's gone through a hell of a lot by the time he moves out to Hollywood and he starts working with his father, who's got a carpet laying firm. Garner can't do that because his knees are absolutely screwed totally from the war and football and all sorts of other things. He had like a double knee replacement, really bad. So he can't do that. He's walking down the street in LA one day. He catches a sign that says Paul Gregory, a talent agency. And he goes, hang on, that can't be the Paul Gregory I went to high school with. He went inside, found out that it was. Paul Gregory turned around to him and said, hey, you're a 6-foot+ strapping guy. I remember you. You're a great guy. Hey, how about we try acting for you? He puts him up for the Caine Mutiny, which is going out on tour with Charles Lawton directing, Henry Fonda starring in it.
And next thing you know, that's at the beginning of his career.
It is. Garner has no lines in it. He's got nothing to say. But what he learned on that tour, and I won't go through it now, but he learned a hell of a lot working with the likes of Henry Fonda, for goodness sake, on his first ever job. And Charles Lawton, being directed by the great Charles Lawton, that experience and that moment, as you rightly say, Michael, set him on the path.
So thing number one, the origin story and the upbringing. I think that's all essential James Garner narrative, because I think we'll probably explore this more. As you say, one of the things that you would have predicted from that upbringing is an abusive guy, a jerk, like he should have had a major chip on his shoulder. But
he should have self-destructed like so many others.
Exactly. And it's sort of like once you know all that about him and then you see that doesn't happen, that's a surprising outcome. It's sort of worth exploring that, like, where does his character come from? Because he has an unbelievable amount of not just charisma, but like, I keep using the word integrity, but I do think he embodies integrity. So, and I think that story gets at all of that. All right, well, let me go right on to my thing number two, because this kind of dovetails into that. I wrote, and this is a little bit in reference to my dad, I guess, Lawman. He is a representative of justice. So this comes up in a couple ways. One, a lot of his roles are in the justice system. Maverick, obviously, is a sheriff. James Garner at one point even plays a Supreme Court justice. Rockford is not a cop, but as a private detective who's, a symbol of justice. But the more important twist here is what was going on behind the scenes in real life. That James Garner, on two occasions, his two most important roles in his career, Maverick and the Rockford Files, in both instances, he ended up getting into deep and important lawsuits with the studio system. So with Maverick, it was with Warner Brothers. His case against them for screwing him over on salary is credited as being a major contribution with ending this sort of exploitative and oppressive studio system.
You knew that you were right. You knew that made a lot more money than they were telling you in terms of their accounting. And you said, I don't care what, I'm going to see that I get my due.
I have been that way, and I'm not litigious, but I left Warner Brothers in a lawsuit when I was doing Maverick. When you're right, you're right. And I think you have to stand up for it. Fortunately, when I sued Universal, I had the money in the bank to be able to do that. I spent $2.2 million in law fees just suing them. And 8 years. That's a long time. Most people can't afford to do that.
He's not the kind of guy who throws the first punch. He is absolutely the kind of guy who's not afraid to throw the counter punch. So he stands up for what is right on more than one occasion. So I like the way he has a sense of right and wrong on and off the screen. So Lawman was my thing number two.
Yeah, I like that. I think, having spoken about what he went through from the age of 6 to 14, that was a hugely unjust upbringing in terms of what his stepmother did to him. And I think that instilled in him a sense of fairness and justice and equality for the rest of his life.
You can almost see that in his physique too, right? In his face and in his demeanor. He embodies a sense of right and wrong in who he is. I think that's one of the reasons the characters he plays just came very naturally to him. That is in his bones.
Another thing, actually, I'd like to add, with regard to the Rockford Files Universal case that you bring up, where they were hiding earnings, weren't they, and hiding profits from the Rockford Files and not declaring it to him. I kind of like the fact that he put up with, from the age of, 6 to 14, so 8 years he put up with his stepmother until the point he had to land the counterpunch, quite literally. And he was 8 years in and out of court with Universal and spent $2.2 million of his own money to win that case, which he did because he was completely in the right. So this guy wasn't just, hey, I'm going to stand up and give a soundbite about equality or justice. This guy, in the end, he had to stand up and counterpunch his mother. He stood up and counterpunched Universal. He stood up and was counted. And that's before we get onto the Screen Actors Guild stuff.
Yeah, well, and one more thing on this. One of the most famous episodes of the Rockford Files centers on this corrupt grand jury story. That is credited with reform of the grand jury in California. So this all comes together. So anyway, Lawman. All right, what do you got for number three?
So for number three, being an actor, being an artist, being a creative, it's about being that, but it's about being that and being real. Absolutely keeping that connected to everyday, real life and not going off into some sort of Ponzi escapist, anal-gazing ether. And one of the things I really like about James Garner is that he was never looking to be a star. He was never looking to be a greatest actor. What James Garner was always looking for was a career, something whereby he could provide for himself. I think he always knew he was going to have a family. That was never an issue. But therefore something that also provided for a family. And he saw acting, he saw the art of acting, the industry of acting, the craft of acting as a career. And I find that really interesting because most actors, even if they think that, will never admit it.
I mean, in a way, what's funny, like, and to make it a famous and gravy thing about, like, what can we learn from ourselves? It's sort of like almost work-life balance. He's got a healthy relationship with his profession. He's committed to it, but he's also not obsessed with it, and he's not obsessed with the competitiveness of it.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a lot of actors, especially of his generation. You know, this is the generation where so many people lost their lives crazily young, or they went completely off the rails because they didn't have that work-life balance, because
your ego takes over in this industry.
It does.
Right? I mean, you
It
see
really
that
does.
story play out all the time, and it did not happen for him. I think that's the point we've been making all throughout.
You have a problem, I think, with people who are maybe not as professional as you. Why do some people have to act cocky or whatever it is that...
Oh, they just got egos bigger than their talent, that's all.
Is that because of insecurity? Is that what it boils down to?
Oh, in some cases, I think that's the case, but I don't think you can lump them in a pile. Some people are egotistical without the talent, but some people have the talent and terribly egotistical about it.
acting can be a dangerous game. If you do it properly, or if you take it to the nth, acting is dangerous. You've got to know who you are and what you're about. You have to have some kind of foundation that you can always come back to if you're to not damage yourself and self-destruct.
But see, here's the thing. I agree with that. I also think that that applies to everybody else, that we, especially men, get really caught up in identities being tied in with their work. This is who I am, right? And that's where your ego will run amok and it lead to habits and path of self-destruction. That didn't happen here, which is, I think, what you're speaking to. So, yeah, Michael, I think that's a really important one, not just for an actor, but for all of us. Okay, let me go to thing number 4. So I wrote down sheep in wolf's clothing. What I mean here, okay, a lot of the characters he plays, I went back and watched Maverick and the Rockford Files, and somebody described it once as presents as a country bumpkin who doesn't know what the heck is going on, but actually underneath he's very, very smart. So he could be a complete alpha. As we've been talking about, he was not in it for the ego. It shows up a little bit in his politics too. He describes himself as a bleeding heart liberal and one of those card-carrying Democrats that Rush Limbaugh thinks is a communist and that he's proud of that. But more than anything else, there is what I see in him. I don't know exactly the right word here, except like emotionally attuned, maybe even sensitive, like interior. This is a guy who's got humanity on the inside, even though he's got a very masculine and sort of tough exterior, right? Like he's a big guy. He comes across in with all this sort of alpha energy, but he's also smiling to himself in places. I love the word wry in the opening obit. I think that word is so perfect for this. And I got to say, this does kind of teach me about, I want to bring this back to my dad for a second, because my dad also grew up with absent parents, and he presents that way too. There is a certain kind of man you'll meet in Texas and Oklahoma and other parts of the South and Southwest that have this kind of crusty exterior, but underneath there's a tremendous amount of emotional intelligence. What I see with my dad is some of that effort to be both like a dude and a man, but also emotional awareness and not be cut off to yourself. And because I think that that's the stuff that leads to the self-destruction that James Garner avoided. So my language for this was sheep in wolf's clothing.
This guy was my idea of balance. This guy was a man's man.
Also a woman's man. I mean, the ladies loved him.
Yeah. Oh, they absolutely. That was all going on as well. He was handsome as hell, man. Absolutely. But also, he had the EQ. He had this humanity. And I think this also ties in with the fact that he never really played the hero and very often actually played a kind of anti-hero. It seems to me that one of the great things about James Garner's life and career is that whether it's his career or whether it's his family, he got the balance right.
This is sort of what we were talking about a second ago. I mean, even though this is a Hollywood career, this is one of those where I feel like a lot of the, ways he went about his life are representative of things I want and things I want to do. And they can hold sort of certain, what seems like contradictions, but there's a balance, as you say. I think that's a really good word.
And I think that's why he ended up being an inspiration to so many people, Michael.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think people can see that in him. It speaks to character. Okay, let me just finish us off with thing number 5, because I think you're going to like this one. Family on the set. This shows up in a lot of different ways. So, he is a kind of, if it's not on the page, it's not on the stage philosophy of an actor. He sometimes told actors on the Rockford Files, we have the best screenwriters in the business. Really read the words. Don't get in there and try and change the script. What I love about this is I think because of this position, we have The Sopranos. Because David Chase was a writer on the Rockford Files. And David Chase, the mastermind behind The Sopranos, talks very admirably about how he learned everything he needed to from the Rockford Files. I think that as we talk about the legacy of James Garner, I think that you have to bring in the way that The Sopranos traces its roots, partly through David Chase, but also through like the support of great writing and complicated characters and challenges to how we understand men and masculinity to some extent. So if it's not on the page, it's not on the stage.
I was very fortunate. I had the three best writers, and Steve Cannell, David Chase, and Juanita Bartlett. We needed a script on Monday, and this was like a Wednesday. And David or Steve said, I'll write the first half, you write the other half. They put them together on Monday, and they worked. That's how good they were.
But it goes beyond the writing. Like everybody who worked on projects where he was the lead talked about him being this very generous figure who created an atmosphere on the set that said it felt like family. And I love people who create found family appropriately in work environments. So it's a kind of simple one. In some ways, circles around some of the other things we've already been talking about. But it's another place where I see something that I just admire in this guy.
He had a really generous heart, a really generous spirit, and he didn't just talk it, he walked it. I mean, on his first ever acting job, he helped John Hodiak learn his lines, and there were huge monologues, huge tracts of script and page work to do in the K Mutiny, obviously. And so John Hodiak turned up to the first table read, completely off script, all lines learned. Henry Fonda was sat there, wasn't off script at the table read, and was like, how the hell did you do this? And John Hodiak said, well, Jimmy Garner over here helped me with the dialogue and helped me learn the words. And Henry Fonda then got James Garner to do the same thing with him. And so this absolute sort of neophyte, doing his first ever acting job, was there helping, supporting, and in his own way, mentoring on his first ever acting job. Never acted before, not got a line to say in it. Henry Fonda and John Hodiak, the two stars of this Charles Lawton-directed play. He was a generous human being.
Yeah, and there's a lot of actors who point to him as both friend and mentor. Paul Newman, Clint Eastwood, Tom Selleck, Ed Harris, Louis Gossett Jr. It's not just, male friendships. Julie Andrews wrote the introduction to his memoir, and Doris Day had wonderful things. I mean, the guy was so popular that at one point they tried to recruit him to be governor of California. He said, I have no interest in politics. I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. Don't bother me with it.
There was some talk of you running as a Democratic candidate for governor of California back in the 60s.
No, not back in the 60s. This was just a few years ago.
Really?
Yeah, 4 years ago. And I didn't want any part of it.
No, if you have to get up and make speeches, this would not be.
Well, yeah, that was one thing, but another is it's like jumping into a den of vipers. I mean, you get in with a bunch of politicians, you're going to get your head cut off. They're not a very admirable group.
But that says something about, who he was and how revered he was. Okay, so let's round this out. So, number one, you said upbringing and origin story. Number two, I said lawman. Number three, you spoke to career. I think the theme of balance really came out. Number four, I said sheep in wolf's clothing. And number five, family on the set and creating an atmosphere of respect. What a list. Okay, let's take a break.
Michael, I love reading, right?
Oh, yeah.
You know what I don't like about it? After I finish a book, and especially if I really like it, I either give it away or it just sits there and it's worth nothing.
Oh, yeah. There's a solution for this, right?
Throw it away?
No. That book is valuable to somebody else, but I'm not just talking about donating it. You can actually get a return. You can bring them to half-price books where they will buy them back.
For like a savings bond or some sort of...
I'm talking cold hard cash, enough for you to pick up the next lunch tab, I'm sure. You can also sell your music, your vinyl, your CDs. You can sell movies, puzzles. They will buy it all back.
This is a life changer.
Half Price Books is the nation's largest new and used bookseller, with 120 stores in 19 states. Half Price Books is also online at hpb.com. Okay, category 3, One Love. In this category, we each choose one word or phrase that characterizes this person's loving relationships. First, we will review the family life data. James Garner was very private. We do know that there was one wife, Lois Clark. They married in 1956. They were married until his death in 2014. He was 28 when they married, so a total of 58 years. They did have one brief separation in 1970. He talks a little bit about it in his memoir. It sounds like it's mostly driven by the demands of work, not by anything else that we can see behind the scenes. He once said, I love this quote, "Marriage is like the army. Everyone complains, but you'd be surprised at the large number of people who re-enlist."
You definitely are against regimentation of all sorts. You set your own standards. They might not conform to others. I mean, for instance, marriage is a regimentation, yet you love this.
Yeah, I don't look at it as a regimentation at all. That's a companionship. That's a feeling between people. And there are certain things that you have to compensate for to live in a marriage. A man can't think of himself. He must think of the people he loves, his children and his wife. And yet, if your partner feels the same way, then there's no bridge to be
gemütlich.
That's right.
Children. He's got one biological daughter. We've mentioned her earlier, Greta Gigi Garner, born 1958. He did also help raise Lois's daughter from a previous relationship, Kimberly. I think it's also worth mentioning he's 1/4 Cherokee, which is from Oklahoma. Makes sense. So, okay, let me go ahead and give my one love word. I'm getting a little carried away with my metaphors lately, but I was thinking about, he's got these very rough roots and yet somehow came out of it. He's a cycle breaker in a way. Like all else in his upbringing would have predicted violence and abuse, and you don't see that. So I was looking for something that sort of spoke to that quality and something native to Oklahoma. So I went with yucca plant. The yucca plant, I don't know if you have a visual of what this is, it grows low to the ground in the red dirt of western Oklahoma. It's got these long spiky leaves, like a desert plant, these tough green blades at the base. But then it sprouts this beautiful tree stalk that has white flowers on it. So it's like almost glowing against the dry land. The flowers are edible. It has also been used in rituals and medicine by native communities. So I started thinking about the yucca plant. I'm like, that's a pretty good symbol of James Garner's family life.
No, I like it. And I think it's far more original than mine, to be honest. I think that's absolutely lovely.
Thank you. It's starting to enjoy this category episode to episode. I don't think I'll ever be an author, man, but it's nice to play with symbols and metaphors for how this works. And
I mean, the yucca plant as being apposite to James Garner, I would never have come up with that. That's great.
But rooted in Oklahoma, too. There is, and I keep praising Oklahoma. I actually, I'm root for the University of Texas. Our rivals are the Oklahoma Sooners. And there is a frickin' statue of James Garner on the OU campus.
And a really lovely one, by the way. A really well done one.
It is. It's a great statue. 50 years from now, I hope people are watching his movies. I don't know. I love that statue's going to be there. So, all right. So anyway, what did you go in this category? I mean, it's sort of a hard one because we only know so much.
Oh, okay. Look, mine's really basic. It's swans. Basically, swans are obviously famously monogamous.
I actually got to say, yes, it's a little bit easy, but I think it applies here. There is a mating for life thing that we can see from the outside. It's beautiful from the outside. Swans kind of glide around the river, make it look easy, but it's got to be hard. I don't know. I think there's something to it, man. Don't undersell yourself.
Well, there is, especially when you're a Hollywood handsome A-lister.
Right. I mean, we have nailed that point, but I totally agree. You would have thought he's cavorting around.
He was big in the 50s. He was cavorting and having friendships with Natalie Wood. But he could have got into a load of bad stuff, basically, in the 60s and 70s, and he didn't. And his relationship and marriage with Lois stayed strong. I think the other thing I like about the swans analogy is that, swans are incredibly graceful looking as they skim across the surface of a lake or a pond or a stream. But underneath, those legs are going a bit crazy.
Exactly, right, which is always the case. That's a pretty good metaphor for marriage, too. It takes a lot of work, man. Yeah. Well, and, Gigi is, when I listened to an interview she did, she's interesting, and she's doing some cool work around animal rescue that kind of ramped up during COVID. The way she talks about her dad kind of verifies the story we're telling here, as best we can see it. I mean, we only ever know so much. But
it's funny when we come across the kids of stars like that. Obviously, they're going to be biased about their parents, and I'm always wary of that. With Gigi, pretty much from the get-go, I was like, the way she was talking, the words she was using, the degree of her clear intelligence. It was like, you know what? I think she's a chip off the old block here. She's telling it like it is, and basically, her dad was a great guy, not just to her but to other people.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on. Category 4, net worth. In this category, we write down our numbers ahead of time. We discuss our reasoning a little bit. We will then look up the net worth number in real time to see who's closest. And finally, we'll place James Garner on the Famous and Gravy net worth leaderboard. So, all right, he's got these two things that we most know him for. Maverick, which I don't think paid well at all. In fact, he lost money because of the lawsuit, is what I read. Mm-hmm. Rockford, he had a lot more creative control and executive producer credits. So I kind of thought Rockford was a little bit of the payday that continues to be syndicated. The royalties of that I expected to be high. And then the Polaroid ads all had me thinking, it's got to be pretty high.
Polaroid's One Step is the world's simplest camera. It's America's biggest seller. You just press the button. The sharp, clear color develops in minutes.
America's biggest seller, so you made it to the top.
Well, the camera did. I just went along for the ride.
Yeah, exactly. So, I don't know. Is there anything else that you'd factored in when you came up with your net worth guess?
No, I think those are the two paydays. I think the only thing I factored in was that I'd like to believe, / am fairly sure, that this guy was about career and providing for his family. He was not about the amassing of wealth for the sake of amassing wealth's sake. So nest egg for sure. I think he was one of those classic, absolutely on the quiet, anonymous philanthropists. I think he helped a lot of people.
Yeah, okay. Now that you're saying that, I think I probably went a little too high. So let's do the reveal. Michael Warburton wrote down 15 million.
Mr. Michael Osborne, you wrote down 60 million.
Yeah, I went a little high. Okay, that's probably way off. All right, the actual net worth number for James Garner, 20 million. All right, I went to, yeah, well done. That makes sense. 20, like,
I don't know.
You went a little under. Yeah, you did pretty good, man.
Look, I think if he hadn't given away so much, if he wasn't such an amazing philanthropist, I think it would have been 60.
Embarrassing. All right, well, let's put him on the Famous and Gravy net worth leaderboard. So this puts him at the 52nd percentile. So he's right in the middle. Quite a crowded dinner table here. We have also with 20 million, Curly Neal, the Harlem Globetrotter, Maurice Sendak of Where the Wild Things Are fame, Gary Shandling, Tom Wolfe, Gene Wilder, Eddie Money, Sidney Poitier, Rodney Dangerfield, and Leslie Nielsen. Wow.
Wow. Wait, what an eclectic bunch.
Well, yeah, I really love the idea that somewhere in the afterlife, the dinner tables are arranged by net worth. And this is the James Garner dinner table. That's the one I want to be at.
I love the fact he's got a Harlem Globetrotter one side and Rodney Dangerfield the other side. I love that. Great.
All right, fabulous. All right, let's move on. Category 5, Little Lebowski Urban Achievers.
They're the Little Lebowski Urban Achievers.
Yeah, the Achievers.
Yes, and proud we are of all of them.
In this category, we each choose a trophy, an award, a cameo, an impersonation, or some other form of a hat tip that shows a different side of this person. What do you got for this award?
Okay, so I want to use this category, if I may, to tell this little story. So, The Rockford Files. Gerard McCraney turns up on set, gets shown into one of the dressing rooms.
This is one of those, like a kind of that guy actor. You would recognize him if you saw him, Gerard McCraney. But yeah.
You see his face, you go, oh, him. Oh, God, yeah, I've seen him in loads of stuff. And you won't know his name necessarily. Anyway, he turns up on the Rockford set. There's 4 or 5 dressing rooms. He's in his dressing room, like a few minutes, big tap on the door.
You mentioned Rockford Files.
Yes, sir. You got a good story
One
there?
of my favorite things about that show.
Yes.
First one I did, I had a scene to do. Mm-hmm. And I'm in my little dressing room, and there's a knock on the door, and I thought, geez, can they be ready that quickly? Mm-hmm. I open the door, and there's Jim Garner, who says, hey, Hoss, I'm Jim. Just wanted to welcome you to the show. Hope you have fun. I'm a day player. I'm doing a scene. And he went out of his way to welcome me to his show.
Cut to a few months later, and Gerard McCraney's on the Universal lot. He's in the commissary. His parents have come along, and they're having a day on the Universal lot in the commissary. There's stars all over the place. Wonderful thing to do for your parents. Gerard McCraney notices that literally shooting across from the commissary on the Universal lot is the Rockford Files. So he says, hang on one second, Mum and Dad, pops over and says, sorry, is James Garner around? I just want to have a quick word. Word is sent through to a meeting that James Garner is in with the studio executive, and the word comes back, no, he's far too busy. Like 30 seconds later, apparently, James Garner comes out of the meeting and, despite the studio executive's protestations, comes out, says hello to Gerard McCraney. Gerard says, hey, my folks are across the street. Can you just come and say a quick hello? It'd make their day, man. He pops over and spends the next hour talking with Craney's parents in the commissary. This was a proper guy who wasn't about hierarchy or snobbery.
Yeah, he understood that this meant something to his parents.
He knew it would. And so screw the meeting, screw the studio exec. These people are as important than this meeting with you, studio executive buddy man. And I love that sort of thing.
Love that story. All right, I'll give you mine. So I've become a little bit more public about the fact that I'm a recovery guy and a 12-step guy. And I want to say I am not a spokesperson. There is a Hallmark movie. James Garner was involved in a lot of Hallmark movies. There's a movie called My Name is Bill W. And this is about the origin story of Alcoholics Anonymous, AA. I watched it. I didn't care for it. I think it's like this kind of corny carbon copy of the AA origin story, just to set it up a little bit. AA is basically founded by two guys, Bill W. and Dr. Bob is how they're referred to. Bill W. is very much the front man. In the movie, he's played by James Woods, who's fine. Again, the script is a little corny. You know, the story is that Bill W., played by James Woods, kind of discovered that if he wants to stay sober, he's got to work with other alcoholics, that he has to, as they say in the rooms, carry the message. And so there's this apocryphal story where Bill W. is on this business trip in Akron, Ohio. He's outside a bar feeling tempted. He's calling around churches and hospitals saying, is there anybody to work with? This woman puts him in touch with this man, Dr. Bob. And the whole philosophy of this is that doctors and priests and cops and judges and parents and wives and so forth cannot get through, but one alcoholic working with another can. In this movie, James Garner plays Dr. Bob. It's just one of those places where the role is more important than the movie. He is so perfectly cast. And, you know, when you get into the 12-step literature, Bill W.'s story is kind of all over the place, and he's the primary author. But Dr. Bob is, to me, the more fascinating character. He is grounded. He is humble. He is constantly calling out Bill W.'s ego and saying, we need to make this about others. Like, he is so perfect as the kind of guiding spirit of the program.
You know, our plane has finally taken off, Smitty. There's no telling how far it will carry us.
I think it's best that we keep both feet firmly planted on the ground.
Come on, flap your wings a bit. You deserve it.
Now, Billy, you and I know from hard experience that the alcoholic has no tolerance for the limelight. That's why we keep harping on anonymity. Not just to protect the drunk from the stigma the public puts on it, but mainly to keep our darn fool egos under control and ourselves out of trouble.
And I am, one, grateful to the program for my own journey, but I'm also fascinated with the kind of design and social architecture of the 12 steps. So I don't know, made references a few times, if 50 years from now, if people are going to be watching James Garner movies, but I do think that this movie might get watched. It's sort of interesting to see it brought to life, and it is refreshing and wonderful to see James Garner in this role.
Wow, that's fantastic, man. That's fantastic.
Okay, let's take another break. Okay, category 6, words to live by. In this category, we each choose a quote. These are either words that came out of this person's mouth or was said about them. You want me to lead, or do you want to kick us off?
No, you go ahead.
Okay, this one's simple, but I think it's got some real depth and weight. Learning is a gift, even if pain is the teacher. There's a joke I make sometimes here, pain is the touchstone of spiritual progress. And I've asked the question, does it have to be my pain, or can I borrow somebody else's? Because I'm scared of pain. We're all scared of pain. Of course we're scared of pain, whether it's physical or emotional or otherwise. I like that he ties it in with learning, that learning is a gift. And honestly, this is something that's speaking to my life right now. I wouldn't overstate the strife that's going on my end. We're all navigating things one day at a time, but it is very helpful for me to remind myself, maybe I'm going through something painful because this is the journey of learning. And I guess I would really underline that word learning, that if there's one sort of core principle that I think anchors my life and brings me back to the best version of myself, it is curiosity. And learning is the journey of curiosity. And so to hear somebody say, learning is a gift, even if pain is the teacher, like that actually gets at a lot. And it's something I need to be told. And it's the kind of words to live by that I want to share with people who are going through their own versions of pain, and that these are instructions to myself at the same time.
I think this is part of the reason why James Garner is such an inspirational figure for so many people, but very much including myself, because not just in spite and despite the pain he went through in his upbringing and in his early life, but I think very much because of that, he became an exceptional human being. And I've got to say, just as on the creative acting side, because James Garner was an actor, great art and artists come from pain. They don't come from perennial happiness and everything being wonderful and having a sense of entitlement. My favorite artists come from pain. And I can see when I watch James Garner, be it from Maverick right the way through to the end of his career, I can see him employing on the most subtle basis the painful parts.
Well said. I wrestle with that, how the relationship between pain and creativity, but I hear you, and I think it's something that has to be examined. All right, so what did you go with here for Words to Live By?
The quote I have is this: I was this dumb kid, born and raised during the Depression. Didn't have anything. No one had anything. Came to Hollywood, got a career, became famous, made some money, had a wonderful family. What would I change? Nothing. I wouldn't change a thing. There it is. What a great take on yourself. This guy had self-knowledge.
Yeah, there's a self-awareness and self-assuredness. I think that says it all. Okay, let's go on. Category 7, Man in the Mirror. This category is fairly simple. Did this person like their reflection, yes or no? This is not about beauty, but rather a question of self-confidence versus self-judgment. I think you and I are probably going to land in the same place here. This was an easy yes, but it's not because he's handsome. It's because he knows himself. And, I think we've gotten at that is the fact of his life. How he got to that, it's still I don't know where this came from. I don't know what was a pivotal moment that we don't know in his life that gave him the balance that we've been speaking to. But anyway, let me not step on your answer here. Did you also say this man liked his reflection in the mirror?
Yeah, but only up to a point. Again, I think we're talking about a guy who was incredibly balanced. He was no Narcissus, that is for damn sure. He would, for instance, go onto a TV or film set and he'd look at the rushes in the first couple of days or the first day to check out how he looked, how he was acting, what the director was doing and the DOP was doing, etc., etc. But as soon as he's got that nailed down, and he'd do that very quickly with the rushes, that's it. I don't need to look at myself anymore.
Yeah, it's a good point, though, that to not want to watch yourself on film. What does that say about this category in Man on the Mirror? I mean, I think that the longer you're looking in the mirror, the more you are a narcissist and the more you probably don't like it. It's the people who don't look at themselves that much that are probably the most self-assured, right? That the mirror is irrelevant. It doesn't matter. Do you have a theory of the case here? I mean, we've been singing this man's praises because there's a lot to love in his character and his integrity and self-assuredness and so forth. I am a little curious about where this comes from. And, maybe, honestly, that's a good segue into the next category. Let's just do it. Category 8, Coffee, Cocktail, or Cannabis. This is where we ask which one would we most want to do with our dead celebrity. I have an answer to this, but the question that I was just raising a minute ago is probably the more interesting one. If we are wanting to learn from this man and his life and his legacy, do you have a theory as to the pivotal moments in his life that would have led to balance and integrity and so forth?
My guess is this. I have this belief that everything that had happened to him up to and including the Korean War had him arrive at a fork in the road. And I don't know whether he had an epiphany, whether it was something he was even aware of, frankly. But I think I can either go down that road or I can go down the other one. And I'm going down this one. That's my guess anyway, Michael.
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, and let me ask, which substance would you want to do with James Garner to sort of guess at that? If there were a situation, a little bit of a drug that might unlock that question, would you pass him a joint? Would you hand him a drink? Would you pour a cup of coffee?
If I was a regular weed taker, because he was his entire life for fundamentally medicinal purposes, and he was a great
he's total stoner. We haven't brought it up yet, but he talks about we should legalize pot and alcohol if we're going to do anything here, and has been smoking pot since Maverick, basically, which
Absolutely.
I love about him.
I love that about him too. If I was a regular user of weed, then I'd say, you know what, let's get high, man, and let's just chat it out. Yeah. That's if I was. So as I'm not, I have to go coffee because I want to be lucid. I want to. The question you've just posed, I'd want to say to him, I'd want to say, hey, Mr. Garner, where was the fork in the road? How come you became this guy that I and so many other people love? When did that happen? Was there a moment? Was there a time? And I can only ask that sort of question if I'm not high. So I'm going with coffee, Michael.
You know, I want to go back to something you said a second ago about privacy. Because it raised the question in my mind that's actually really interesting. I do feel like the people I most admire and who have integrity, character, and qualities that I aspire to in myself, there is something that they protect in themselves. There is some part that they don't share, that they do hold sacred and keep private no matter what. And in the age of performative social media and this impulse to sort of be vulnerable in public about all our traumas and all that, it's an interesting question to me of like, where do we draw those boundaries? Even stuff that may be important. I mean, this is a big thing in 12 steps, that one reason that two alcoholics can connect with each other is shared trauma. You understand the experience. You understand the insidious nature of the cycle of addiction. And so it's weird. Right now, I feel like we're in this place with culture where we don't know what is helpful and what is in service of the ego. Because sometimes revealing all your trauma and revealing all the crap you went through in your life is actually about trying to make yourself look important or interesting. A previous generation was, like James Garner's generation, was more withholding about some of that stuff. I don't feel like we know how to draw the right boundaries, and I don't know if we know how to do that around our creativity. With all of that said, I want to smoke a joint with James Garner. I do want to get high with this guy because I don't know that the answer to the question I just posed exists inside anybody in a way that they can speak to, but it's what I enjoy in dialogue and in conversation in an interview. And I'd like to develop my own theory a little bit more because if there's one thing I take away from his story, he wasn't trapped by his past. I used the word cycle breaker a few times. Like he did somehow develop into a man of integrity and character despite what you would have otherwise predicted. That just can't be stated enough. How remarkable and great that is. And that's kind of the point. That's kind of what I want for everybody. I want to be able to break cycles of generational trauma. I want people to not be trapped by their upbringing and by the trauma of their early years. And so, yeah.
I remember in my early 20s, and I said, right, okay, Michael, you're a blank canvas, and you're going to paint onto that blank canvas whatever version of yourself you want to be.
This is your decision to be an actor.
No, this is me deciding what kind of human being I want to be. And the only reason I mention it is because I think James Garner exerted a huge amount of control over the human being he wanted to be. And he didn't do it for the wrong reasons. He did it for the right reasons. I'd love to know how he came, what those right reasons were over a coffee, but he did it for the right reasons. He took control, exerted control, and became the guy that he wanted to be. Love that.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we've arrived. The final category, the Vanderbeek, named after James Vanderbeek, who famously said in Varsity Blues,
I don't want your life.
In that Varsity Blues scene, James makes a judgment that he does not want a certain kind of life based on just a single characteristic or two. So here, Michael Warburton and I will form a rebuttal to anyone skeptical of how James Garner lived. There's not a lot of counter-argument here. I mean, we've been sort of heaping praise, rightly so, on this guy. The family life looks great. The career balance life looks great. I don't want the early childhood trauma, but it frankly made him a more interesting person. So I see a man who takes a certain kind of pride in his upbringing. I think I would also, if there's one, and this is maybe a bit of a reach, one thing I would put in the kind of counter-argument side of things, it is a little unfortunate to me that there's not one role in movies that I have high confidence will be watched for years to come. It's a little bit of a legacy argument, and it's weak. I don't think it's a strong argument, but I feel like it's worth lingering on. You've said on social, Twitter X and Threads and Blue Sky and all the rest of it, that you are seeing a lot of love out there for James Garner. I think that's even kind of surprising because, like, from what? For why? It has way more to do with who he was than I think his roles overall. And so there's a legacy question for me. But there is a statue in Norman, Oklahoma, and that means something. So I don't know. Is there anything else you'd put in the counter-argument category? Like, why else would you not want this life?
Well, actually, do you know what? I'm going to push back a little bit, and I'm going to push back on the film stuff, because although there's no quintessential James Garner movie, he was in some great movies. And I'm sorry, I'm just going to list a couple of them now. The Children's Hour is a great movie.
I've never seen it. I need to watch that one.
Well, then watch it. It's great. Okay. Go and have a look. It's a great movie based on a Pulitzer-winning play. The Americanization of Emily is a brilliant anti-war movie. That's why it didn't do well at the time. Grand Prix is a fantastic Frankenheimer movie.
Even if I'm not a car guy, I should watch Grand Prix?
Well, maybe not. I don't know. I loved it. I'm not particularly a car guy, but it's not just about cars. It's about relationships. It's about Monaco, about lots of things. Support your local sheriff. It showed the comedy chops James Garner had.
I thought you were telling me to support my local sheriff. That's the name of a movie. It's funny. You are so much better. I mean, your Hollywood history is just, at a level above mine. I haven't seen most of these movies, but they actually sound pretty good. I'm interested now.
Well, I mean, and go and watch the one he was Oscar nominated for, Murphy's Romance. He is wonderful in Murphy's Romance with Sally Field. And
pushback accepted. I hear you. I think let's shift right into not just why we would want that life, but like the big reasons we would want that life.
Okay, look, I mean, despite the many trials and tribulations of his early life, from when he lost his mother at the age of, just 5, for goodness sake, born into the Great Depression, right through an abusive stepmother, to 2 wars, to roaming around doing all kinds of odd jobs in oil fields, you name it, lost in terms of purpose, which is such a key thing to all our lives. He was determined to authentically remain himself. And he never lost this. And I think this was Garner's foundation that helped him to stay the person he was, despite these terrible hardships, and becoming, also in helping him to become an A-list, Hollywood, globally successful actor and star. This guy remained his authentic self his whole life. That is inspirational to this guy, I've got to say.
Yeah, we use the word authentic a lot these days, but I think it applies here and he embodies it. I mean, I think I'm going to go with lead with curiosity. One thing that I brought up my dad a few times, this is something I really admire in my father, is that he's an intellectual. You would look at him and, like I said, he talks like Hank Hill, and you would think he's a country bumpkin, but it's a pretty good imitation, isn't it?
That's pretty good, yeah. I like that.
But underneath, my father is a very well-educated man, and if there's one thing I have learned from his model and from his character is like curiosity is everything. I see that in James Garner too. This whole life learning is a gift, even if pain is the teacher. That is such an important idea to hold on to. And you see it in James Garner in both his private life and in his professional life and in his interviews and in all the testimonials about who he was. So that's thing number 2. He led with curiosity. And I know we're kind of landing on some like cliche ideas, authenticity and curiosity, but there's no other way to say it. I don't know. Thing number 3, we might as well point to your one-word love, swans. I don't know enough here, but this looks like somebody who found family, and he built family, and he seemed to have a stable family at home by what we can tell, and he built family on the set.
As a counterpoint, I think, by the way, to the lack of it when he was growing up, he took something bad and said, I'm going to flip that into something good.
I think that is all I need, and I don't know that I need to dwell on it. So let's recap here. Authenticity, curiosity, and family/love. So with that, James Vanderbeek, I'm James Garner, and you want my life. Before we get to the speed round, if you enjoyed this conversation with James Garner, if it put you in a good mood, think of somebody in your life right now who could use a good mood and share this episode with them. Send it to them right now. You've got the phone in your hand. It's how we build listeners and grow the show. Okay, let's get to the speed round. Mr. Warburton, plugs for past shows. If you like the James Garner episode, what other episode might you like?
The one you did on Christopher Lee. I mean, I thought
of all people, right? Christopher Lee.
Of all people. I mean, you could argue chalk and cheese in so many ways. Actually, I think there are a lot of similarities. That Christopher Lee, he may have played Dracula and been a horror icon, but he was actually a lovely, lovely man.
And a fascinating life, too. It's so much more interesting than you would think. I love that. Goodness, thanks for calling attention to it. All right, episode 62, Lord of Horror, Christopher Lee. I am going to go with episode 84, Vocal Bedrock, Johnny Cash. I do think that there's some common denominators between Johnny Cash and James Garner. You know, one of the themes of the conversation we just had is sort of like evolving visions of masculinity with a tough exterior and a sensitive interior and a high EQ. So if you enjoyed this episode with James Garner, I think you might like 84, Vocal Bedrock, Johnny Cash. Here is a little preview for the next episode of Famous and Gravy. She had a self-effacing personality, which colleagues and interviewers often commented on.
I'm going to say Barbara Walters because of interviewers, but I guess Barbara Walters was the interviewer.
Yeah. Not Barbara Walters. Famous and Gravy listeners, we'd love hearing from you. If you want to reach out with a comment, question, or to participate in our opening quiz, email us at hello@famousandgravy.com. In our show notes, we include all kinds of links, including to our website and our social channels. Famous and Gravy was created and co-hosted by Amit Kapoor and me, Michael Osborne. Thank you so much to Michael Warburton for guest hosting. This episode was produced by Allie Arrazola with original music by Kevin Strang. Thanks so much. See you next time. Follow Famous and Gravy on the Wondery app. You can listen to more episodes early and ad-free right now by joining Wondery Plus in the Wondery app, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify. Before you go, tell us about yourself by completing a short survey at Wondery.com/survey.
Shopify's point-of-sale system helps you sell at every stage of your business. Need a fast and secure way to take payments in person? We've got you covered. How about card readers you can rely on anywhere you sell?
Thanks. Have a good one.
Yep, that too. Want one place to manage all your online and in-person sales? That's kind of our thing. Wherever you sell, businesses that grow with Shopify. Sign up for your $1 a month trial at shopify.com/listen. Shopify.com/listen.